here's a horoscope with a very powerful Dvadasamsa. You can see we've got an exalted Venus, a sun in its own Rashi, and the moon in its Mula Trikona. So when you've got three really strongly dignified planets like that, without any debilitated planets, it's pretty likely that's going to be a great Varga for the person. An exalted planet will usually make up for, a planet in bad dignity, it'll make up for a debilitated planet or a great enemy's planet or an enemy's planet in what it does. And so when you got three really strong planets, it's really looking promising. So, and this person, as the first glance would suggest, came from a very strong family, very, very wealthy, long-lived family that had been wealthy for generations upon generations. And which, the family moved in all the right circles. So, as good as a family as you could ever hope to be born into, basically. And the first glance shows that. Now, we should never just look at first glance. We should actually analyze what's happening. But chances are, when you've got three well-dignified planets, without any debilitated planets or any other real nasty things that you see right away, chances are it's going to be a pretty good Varga. So we're going to study this Varga looking at the bhavas first. So the 12th bhava is influenced by the sun. I'll pull up the dignities here. The sun's in its own house to 44 points. It's influenced by the moon in Mula Trikona only a little bit to 5 points. By Mars in a friend sign to 18 points. By Mercury, its lord. Mercury's in a great enemy sign though, so only can help a little bit. By Jupiter, who's in an enemy sign. So Jupiter's actually hurting the 12th bhava. Then it's aspected very strongly by Venus, who's exalted. And it's aspected very strongly by Saturn, who's in a great friend sign, so helping. So other than this bad aspect of Jupiter, we've got several nice planets influencing it. So overall, it becomes a really good 12th bhava. And so there's a lot of, good past life karma for this person to enjoy in life. A very strongly favorable ancestral background and lineage to create a really good life for this person. We already know there's some issues with the Lord. As I've said, Mercury's in a great enemy sign. And you might have seen that Mercury's in Cancer in a natural enemy sign where it's sleeping. And it's also thirsty there. Luckily, it's just thirsty. It's not starved, which is worse. But we'll get back to Mercury. First, I want to look at some of the bhavas. The 9th bhava is falling in Leo. And again, Leo always gives really strong, successful, powerful, ancestral qualities. Sun in Leo and the Dvadasamsa, Sun in Aries, usually indicates people that have some strong, noble lineage or something along those lines. Even if it's very distant, sometimes you'll still see that. Like maybe people's families were royalty 100 years ago. You still might see a strong sun in the chart, even though these days they're not royalty, they're just working at a corporation or something in a good position. So anyway, the sun is nice, it's in its own Rashi. The sun is aspect by its friend and Mula Trikona moon to 31 points, so it gets delighted by that. It's aspected by Mars, its friend to 58 points, so it's more delighted. It's aspected by its enemy Venus just a little bit, and aspected by Saturn, its enemy, by a decent amount, but not enough to make up for that Mars influence and the moon. And that to start with, the sun has a good foundation by being in its own Rashi. So this is a good 9th bhava. So good, strong parental influences, strong committed parents. It's true, the parents were together, there wasn't divorce. Parents were strong individuals. So a very strong parentage that this person came from. The other important bhava is the 3rd bhava. Now, the 3rd bhava cusp in the Rashi chart is conjunct Venus. And Venus is exalted. So now we've got a great 3rd bhava cusp. Then The third Bhava Kasa is aspected by Sun, who's in its own Rashi by 19 points, by Saturn in a great friend sign to 12. So there's some good stuff. But then also the third Bhava is hurt by Mercury to 32 points, which is in a great enemy sign and hurting, and Saturn by 12 points, which is hurting. However, we've got an exalted Venus conjunct the third Bhava Kasa in the Rashi, which means it's conjuncting that third Bhava everywhere. And so the third Bhava Kasa comes out to be pretty good, like average, because, this troublesome Mercury and Jupiter, even though the aspects aren't as strong, a planet in an enemy sign or a great enemy sign does as much damage as two planets in own sign help. So it comes out okay, but not great by any means, even though there's an exalted Venus. So third Bhava is pretty good. It's average, not anything particularly good or unfortunate about that. Okay, so we'll just consider that average as it was. Parental relationship with siblings was average. Sibling happiness was average, and so on. The other important Bhava is the sixth Bhava. Okay, now the sixth Bhava is falling in Pisces in the Dvadasamsa, and Jupiter is the lord of that and also conjuncts it. Now Jupiter is in a great enemy or an enemy sign, so he can just help that sixth Bhava a little bit, barely at all. Okay. Then Jupiter's influenced by his friend Moon, who's in a good dignity, by his friend Mars, who's in good dignity, and by his neutral Saturn. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Let's look at the sixth Bhava Kasa first. The sixth Bhava is influenced by the Moon to 35 points in good dignity, Mars in good dignity, and Saturn in good dignity. So the sixth Bhava only has the dignities of good planets, or aspects, influences of good planets, and its lord. Jupiter is the only planet that influences the sixth Bhava through conjunction here in the Rashi, but since Jupiter is in the enemy sign, it's only hurt a little bit. But then we got all these other planets, Moon, Mars, and Saturn helping the sixth Bhava. So it's a good sixth Bhava, okay, all in all. So this is all the important Bhavas are good in this Dvadasamsa, okay, as we'd expect when we see that many strongly dignified planets and an exalted planet. So the person has, all in all, great karma coming, ancestral karma coming into their life, and they have a strong lineage of ancestors that have left wealth for subsequent, enough wealth for many, many generations after them. And this person was born into all that. Now let's take a look at the lords. Mercury is the lord of the 12. Mercury is thirsty, so he's not really satisfied with what it's getting ancestrally. It's not satisfied with what comes from its parents and grandparents, what it's inherited, so to speak. Mercury, however, is influenced, it's hurt by the Moon to 6 points. Mars is neutral, Jupiter's neutral, but helped by exalted Venus. So Mercury still becomes delighted by Venus. So they enjoy a lot. They're able to delight and enjoy that ancestral karma, even though there's a sort of lack underneath all that. They're not completely at peace with it, happy with it, as they would be if Mercury was in better dignity. But it still ends up being a pretty good Mercury so far. Now, there's one other problem with Mercury, and that is that it's conjunct the Sun in the Rashi chart. So now the Sun is agitating that Mercury. And the aspect of Venus to Mercury is just 19 points. So Venus is throwing some delight in there, but the Sun is strongly agitating Mercury. And so that, not only is there a lack of fulfillment, the thirst that comes from Mercury being in Cancer, it also feels burdened and agitated by it. And, the Sun puts a lot of pressure on something to perform, and often that's why it's agitated, because it doesn't feel like it can really succeed in it or do it all the way. Okay? So it's really not a good 12th lord. And the planets that are influencing it, that are agitating it and thirsting it are the moon and the sun, which are the individual self planets, the planets that represent you or the person. So the sun is what a person feels they really should do, and the moon, of course, is going to be what they want to do. Okay? The moon is that really personal thing. This is what you feel you need for yourself. And the moon doesn't want to make sacrifices with that. It takes care of number one. The sun, however, does what it thinks it has to do, even if that requires making sacrifices. So both those things are hurting Mercury, the 12th lord, the most important lord in the Dvadasamsa. The other important lord in the Dvadasamsa is the 9th lord. Sun is in Mula Trikona, where it's nice and strong. It's towards the end of Leo, which is good because that causes less agitation to Mercury, but bad because it gives less strength for the sun to support that 9th house. Then the sun's influenced by two friends, Moon and Mars, and by Saturn and Venus, two enemies. But overall, it's a better sun because it starts out strong, and it has a strong aspect of Mars and a strong aspect of Moon. So it ends up being a pretty decent sun, a little better than it is worse. Okay, a little better, high average, we can say. So good 9th lord there. So again, that confirms the good parenting, the good upbringing, the noble upbringing, and the noble parenting and all that stuff. And that means the parents simply behave nobly. And this was something that becomes part of that person's character, because of course the sun is your character too. The other important Baba is the 3rd Baba. The 3rd Baba lord is Saturn. Saturn's in natural friend sign, so it's delighted there. Then it's starred by Sun, it's starred by Moon, and it's starred by Mars. It's severely starred by these planets. Mercury can't help it, Venus barely helps it. And since Mercury is sleeping, Saturn being in this sign doesn't allow for Saturn to really get any delight from being in Mercury's sign in the first place. So this is a very starved Saturn. Sun, Moon, Mars are all starving Saturn. And of course, and Saturn represents that 3rd lord. So 3rd house has to do with your desires and being able to do what you want. And the 3rd lord is just fragmented. So obviously the person will be very frustrated with respect to what they can do in the context of their family life and their ancestral life. And not embrace that. Okay, so we see a strong sort of independent but frustrated streak with that Saturn. The 6th Baba lord is Jupiter. Jupiter is in a natural neutral sign, aspected by friend Moon and friend Mars. So good, Mars, Jupiter is delighted. And so this person will, want to fulfill their responsibilities to their ancestors as best they can. But then we got this real frustrated 3rd Baba. Let's look at Rahu and Ketu before we draw our conclusions. Ketu is conjunct Saturn, so it's going to give the results of Saturn in all Vargas. And we've seen, and it's going to give results of Saturn in the Dvadasamsa. And Saturn is starved in the Dvadasamsa. And so we see that there's trouble brewing, in respect to completing and resolving their ancestral karmas. Rahu is in conjunct Mars in the Rashi, and then it's in Cancer in the Dvadasamsa. So it'll give the results of Moon and Mars. Mars is aspected first to start with is in a natural neutrals, so just okay, but then aspected by friend Moon, Sun, and friend Jupiter, and no problematical planets except Mercury, who's sleeping, so can't help him. So Rahu's good there, okay? Then Mercury oh, excuse me, yeah, the moon, the planet that rules Rahu, the moon is in aspect is first, it's strong in Mula Trikona. It has its friend's moon's aspect, aspected by its friend Mercury, who's sleeping, who can't help, and then aspected by a bunch of neutrals. But it's good. So Rahu is a good planet. It's a plenty solid planet. Ketu is bad news. Okay, the 12th Lord is not good. The 6th house is good, and Rahu's good. Okay, so one end of the spectrum's good, one end of the spectrum's bad. 9th house and 9th Lord are great. 3rd Lord is terrible, and it's of course related to Ketu. So there's a lot of frustrated ancestral karma with this person coming into this life because of the Ketu connection, and the Ketu giving the results of Saturn, who's also the 3rd Lord, one of the important lords, and Saturn's in bad shape. So this person really comes into this life in this great family, but bearing all this frustrated ancestral karma. And then they've got a good Rahu, a good 6th Lord. So there is an element of wanting to fulfill responsibilities and doing the right thing, to fulfill one's responsibilities. And the 6th house is a house of servitude. It's doing what, it's paying your debts and not necessarily needing to be in charge. You don't do 6th house things for attention or fame. That's 10th house. You do 10th house things because you want to be famous and powerful, stuff like that oftentimes. You do 6th house things because you feel responsible towards it and you want to pay that debt. Then they've got a strong 9th house and 9th Lord, so they've got a very noble upbringing and a noble idealism. And I use the word noble because that's the nature of the sun, and the 9th house, of course, is ideals. So this person's born to this incredible family, and he's meant to be the heir and take the family to the next level. But he doesn't want to. He wants to do other things. So he declines his inheritance. Not all the financial inheritance. There's no way that's going to happen, and you can see that really easily simply due to the moon being in great shape and Venus being in great shape. Those planets, benefics tend to make things easy, and what makes things easy is money. So it doesn't decline all the family wealth. He has that at his disposal, but he declines, the takeover where he's going to be in charge of the company, of the family's company and responsibilities. So he declines that because he doesn't want to be involved. He feels like he needs to do something else. So he declines all that. He separates dramatically amidst great disappointment to the rest of the family and to the other people involved due to that really, troubled Ketu. It's a difficult resolution. Ketu is all about resolving and completing your karmas. And when it's in bad shape in the Dvadasamsa, you do that in a shocking, difficult way. But that's what the person does. They go through it and they make that separation. But then we've got this really good Rahu and this really good, and a good 6th house. So what they end up doing, they do other things that makes the family proud in different respects that, people feel okay about. So he's not ostracized by this. The family doesn't hate him for it. He ends up doing things in a conscientious, responsible, beneficial way, just not the things that he was quote unquote born to do. And the family was able to be happy with that, make peace with it. And he wasn't chastised from the family. He did not separate, and not have responsibilities towards the family or anything like that. But he still completed those family karmas of he was not going to accept those ancestral burdens in this lifetime because of that bad 12th house. Instead, he picked up new responsibilities indicated by the 6th house that he instead fulfilled in a way that made everyone proud. Okay? So really an interesting chart where you see this great Dvadasamsa which promises powerful ancestry, but then a problematic Ketu and a problematical 12th house and 12th Lord, or especially 12th Lord, which indicates that there's the karmic issues to be resolved are going to be climatic and difficult, and intense is a good word of saying it, and final, because it's the 12th house. And that's just how it was for this person. Now let's see the strongest planets in the chart are Venus, Sun, and Moon. The strongest house that Venus is aspecting is the 11th bhava. Okay? The strongest house that the Sun aspects is the 1st bhava, and the strongest house that the Moon aspects is the 9th bhava. And they're all strong aspects. So all those houses are going to really flourish. 9th house, because that nice moon, great parentage. Okay? Venus, the 11th bhava, lots of gains, a lot of inherited gains. Completely true for this person. Okay? Inherited income. 11th house is the house of income. This person never had to be burdened by making a living. Nice Venus there. Then Venus also represents, then the moon was the other planet, right? Sun. Strongest aspect to the 1st house is the sun. So that's that strong character that, doesn't budge under pressure, that takes its own path. The sun is a very independent planet that can make sacrifices, which the person did. So they went their own path, which is the sun, influencing that logic. They had that strength of character to do what they thought they should be doing, rather than what they were born to do by having to be the heir to this family empire. Worst planet in the chart is Mercury. It's in a great enemy sign, followed closely by Jupiter. Oh, getting back to the good planets. The Sun conjuncts the 7th bhava cusp, and Moon doesn't conjunct any bhava cusp, and Venus conjuncts the 3rd. So the strongly dignified planets are going to help out 3rd bhava and 7th bhava a lot too. This person's marriage was extremely important to them, and in fact, this person's marriage helped them become the independent type person they were. That's the Sun involving that 7th house. And then Venus influences the 3rd house. That's the, 3rd house is the house of competition, and it's the house of working with associates and teammates and siblings. And this person was extremely skilled at that. That's one of the reasons they're able to deal with everything in their family peacefully and effectively and diplomatically. A nice Venus in the 3rd house, conjunct the 3rd cusp. Venus involving the 3rd house cusp makes a person a peaceful person, and not a person who's going to be overbearing or willful or pushy or cruel. Now Venus is exalted, so this person's very charming, which made everything with their ancestors more smooth. Okay, and it gives them that charming skill and grace that Venus in the 3rd house gives. And it's a really strong quality. It's an ancestral quality that their family has due to this Venus giving that due to the Dvadasamsa. Okay? All right, the troublemaking planet is Jupiter. Mercury's worst, okay? Mercury's in a great enemy sign, and Mercury's influencing the 7th bhava, and Mercury is, let's see here. Our strongest aspect is to the, what bhava? Okay, strongest aspect of Mercury is to the, is to the 1st bhava, okay? And it conjuncts the 7th bhava cusp. So Mercury is going to hurt those 2 bhavas. Mercury has to do with our relations in general, of all kinds, our friends, our family, everyone we have any kind of relationship with. Mercury rules those people as a group. And we can see that those people in the group will not be supportive of his marriage and will not be supportive of his own path. So there was that element in there as well, unfortunately. Okay, so yes, he lost some friends. Some friends didn't support him in his choices in life, involving his marriage, 7th house. Okay, some business aspects would occasionally become frustrated due to that bad Mercury influencing the 7th house. Because again, how your business, which is the 7th house, is influenced by your ancestors is going to be based on Mercury in the Dvadasamsa, because Mercury is the planet of business. And so there are some, in this person's life, there are some disappointments in that regard. Okay? So then we can kind of see what house is getting hurt the most through ancestral karma. The house of business, the 7th house, and the house of relationships and partnerships. Both which suffered some frustrations due to that Mercury. Okay? So when Mercury Antadasha would come up, there would be some frustrations would pop into place in those areas of his life due to this ancestral karma coming through. The first bhava also represents your body and your health. And so that Mercury indicates inherited weaknesses that the person is born with. Okay? So the Mercury organs and elements are inheritedly weak organs in this person. And you'll tend to see that if you get a family's chart, you see a couple generations, you'll tend to find similar planets being weak in the Dvadasamsa, indicating, if aspecting the ascendant, indicated inherited physical weaknesses. And of course, strong planets aspecting it will indicate inherited very strong physical attributes. Okay, so that 12th house is that inheritable chart, inheritable qualities that we get, the karmas, but also our health, which is the first bhava. Okay, so here's an example. Basically I wanted to show a really strong Dvadasamsa. But again, if you see some problems with Ketu or Rahu in the Dvadasamsa, or the 12th house, 12th lord, there's going to be something disrupting the perfect flow of ancestral karma, no matter how strong other things are. And here we've seen how one of the key planets, Ketu, is trashed in this Dvadasamsa. So the person didn't merit the full influence of their ancestral karma. They got very little compared to what they could have. They could have had an empire. Instead, they took a store. Is how you could look at it. Instead of taking a huge empire, they took a store, and they did well with what their ambition was. But they could have had this huge empire. It was on their plate. But that bad Ketu and the bad 12th lord, that agitated and thirsty 12th lord, did not let them have the full dose of their ancestral, of what the ancestors had to give them, which, as you can see in this chart, was huge because of those nicely dignified planets. But they just took a smidgen of what was available to them. And that was their own choice. But it was still their fate. It was still their destiny to not only get that. It's just a destiny manifested through their own choice. And that's indicated by the moon being a strong player and the sun being a strong player of smashing that Mercury. And also of starving Saturn, the lord of Ketu. Because the sun and moon represent yourself and what you choose to do. Venus is the influence your spouse has, Mercury's influence your friends have, and so on. But your choices and how you make things happen is largely going to be indicated by the moon and the sun. Sun can be father, moon can be mother too, but they always come down to who we are and how we push our weight around and the things we need when we look at the sun and moon. And those two things are the things that broke that inherited the full dose of their inheritance by smashing the 12th bhava, Lord Mercury, and by ruining Ketu's Lord Saturn, therefore by trashing Saturn. Okay? And also you can see Saturn Ketu gives the results of Saturn, who he joins, and Saturn's the 10th Lord, the Lord of Power. So this person, like I said, could have ran an empire. Instead, they ran a store. So that's just that, in fact, that terrible Saturn. So it's a good example, this chart, of remembering, look at the chart and see the strengths in the chart, the Venus, the Sun, and the Moon. But then you have to bear down and really look at the critical bhavas. In this case, the 12th bhava and the critical planets, Ketu and Rahu. Those things spell out so much more about what's fully going to happen. So no doubt this person came from a great ancestral lineage as indicated by the strength of the planets in the chart. But the way everything works together, the two most important things, the 12th Lord and Ketu, Rahu is equally important, but two of the three most important things are bad. And Ketu is completely trashed. Nothing good on Ketu at all. It's completely trashed. And so, while they are born into a great ancestral lineage, they're not going to receive all that great ancestral karma that appears to be in their life. And so they didn't. Okay? All right. Let's see if there's anything else I want to add to this chart here. Just in general, one thing you'll notice in this chart, you see a lot of Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn, a lot of Haya Dvadasamshas. Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn are all in this. Mercury is a critical planet. He's the 9th Lord. Saturn is the critical Lord of Ketu. Two of the critical planets in the chart happen to be in these Haya Dvadasamshas. And then the third one's important too. It's the 6th Lord. So it's also important. And that Dvadasamsha is Dvadasamsha of knowledge and understanding. It's not so really concerned with doing things. Okay? So that made it a lot easier for this person not to inherit all this stuff because doing all that just wasn't as important to them. If Mercury and Saturn had been in, say, the Ashwi Dvadasamsha, the Dvadasamsha that wants to maintain things, there would have been a much greater desire to run the empire and maintain it. But it's not, it's Haya. That's the fourth of the different types of Dvadasamsha. It's the end Dvadasamsha. It's the Dvadasamsha of just moving on with knowledge. All that's left is one's knowledge and not actually material things. So that always makes it easier to let go of things because that an Haya type person lives in their brains more. They live with their knowledge and their thoughts and their ideals, and more so than really caring to do concrete things. Okay? The Ganesha Dvadasamshas are really intent on doing and producing new things. The Ashwi Dvadasamshas are really focused on maintaining and taking care of things. The Yama Dvadasamsas are all about struggling with things and oftentimes letting go of things after some effort's been made. But the Haya Dvadasamsas are all about just understanding things. They don't need to tangle with things. Okay, so that made this whole process a lot easier for the person, and it's probably one of the reasons they went with it. Had they all been in Ashwi Dvadasamshas, there would have been a really great desire to maintain and manage everything. In which case, probably things would have all gone wrong because those things were afflicted, right? So the ancestral karma had to suffer. The Sun and Mars, and the Sun's more important here because he's one of the key planets. He's the 9th Lord, and he's stronger. Mars is not that important of a planet. He is the Lagna Lord, the Dvadasamsha, but he's not as important. But being the Lagna Lord, the Lord of new things, or being the Lagna Lord was the Lord of his path, and it's in the Ganesha, the new things Dvadasamsha, and then the Sun, which is ruled in the 9th house, a sense of purpose, and also a planet of the self, is about new things. Those two things helped create extra independence to do something new, which is what they ended up doing, instead of just a family thing. Because that Ganesha Dvadasamsha is that when ancestral karma coalesces to create something new, which is something that ancestors haven't done previously. And that's what happened with this person. Here's a guy who's not doing what he's inherited to do. He's doing something new on his path, which is the Sun and Mars. So, anyways, I hope that's a good example and that you get plenty out of that. And we will have another example in the next video.